You are standing under a bucket in your own kitchen, listening to water hit the bottom of it again. This spot on your roof has come back 3 times. 3 roofers, 3 invoices, same leak. 90 years ago, a farmer outside a small Ozark town fixed this same problem with $3 in supplies, and it never came back. Stay with me, I found the record that proves it. The first time I drove out to that stretch of gravel road near the Missouri Ozarks, it was late October, and the air smelled like wood smoke and wet limestone. The farmhouse sat back from the road behind a stand of bare oaks, and the tin gutters still held the shape someone had hammered into them decades ago. I was there to see a man named Everett Klein, 78 years old, who still lived in the house his grandfather built in 19, not patched twice a decade like mine, never replaced. He walked me up a ladder himself, faster than I could climb it, boots finding each rung like he'd done it 1,000 times. At the top, he pointed to a seam along the ridgeline where the roofing met the flashing. It was dark, almost black, slightly tacky in the afternoon sun, and it didn't crack when he pressed his thumbnail into it. He told me his grandfather mixed it in an old coffee can over a wood stove, and that same approach, reapplied only twice in 90 years, had outlasted 4 generations of weather. I asked him if he'd ever called a roofer. He laughed and said the last one who came out tried to sell him a full tear-off for a leak that didn't exist. Before I left, Everett showed me the same coffee can, still sitting on a shelf in his workshop, the label long gone and the metal dented from decades of use. He said his grandfather kept one batch going for years at a time, using it whenever a new seam needed attention, never once calling anyone to do the job for him. I didn't understand what I was looking at until I started digging through county agricultural records back home, and what I found changed how I think about every roofing quote I've ever paid for. If you want more of this kind of forgotten fix before it disappears again, hit subscribe now. Here is what the roofing industry sells you: a full tear-off every 20 years, a fresh layer of asphalt shingles, and a warranty that quietly excludes the exact kind of leak you're dealing with. Homeowners now pay an average of about $9,500 for a full roof replacement, with costs climbing past $46,000 depending on size and material. That figure climbs every season lumber and labor costs rise. Read the fine print on most shingle warranties and you'll find a clause excluding flashing failures entirely, which happens to be where the majority of leaks actually start. Meanwhile, the failure point on most roofs isn't the shingle, it's the seam, the flashing, the small joint where 2 surfaces meet and water finds its way in. Sealing that seam properly is a $5 fix. Replacing the whole roof is a 5-figure fix. Guess which one gets recommended, and guess which one keeps a roofing company in business through the winter months when new construction slows down. I've had 3 separate estimates for the same leak over the years, and not one ended with someone handing me a putty knife and a tube of sealant. Every single one ended with a proposal for a full replacement, financing included, priced closer to the high end of that range than the low end. There's a reason for that beyond simple greed. Roofing crews are paid by the job, not by the hour saved. A 5-minute seam repair doesn't cover a truck roll, let alone a crew of 4. So the incentive, quietly and without anyone deciding it on purpose, tilts toward the biggest job that can be justified, not the smallest job that solves the problem in front of them. But here's what families like the Kleins never did. They never tore off a roof because of one failing seam, and they never let a $5 problem get quoted as a $10,000 one. They treated the joint as the problem to solve, and trusted a fix that had already proven itself instead of a sales pitch dressed up as advice. And it's the reason that farmhouse in Missouri is still dry 100 years after it was built, without a single full replacement or financing plan attached to it. The mixture Everett showed me is 3 ingredients, all still sold today: pine tar, boiled linseed oil, and hydrated lime, combined in roughly equal parts and warmed until they blend into a thick, dark paste. None of these are rare items. They sit on ordinary shelves in ordinary stores, ignored by most shoppers because nothing about the packaging suggests they belong on a roof. Applied along a seam or flashing joint, the mixture cures into a flexible, water-shedding skin that moves with temperature changes instead of cracking like modern caulk does. The science behind it is simple, and it isn't just an old farmer's claim. Restoration specialists confirm pine tar is a genuine marine-grade wood preservative, historically rendered from pine stumps and still used on roofs, decks, and facades, typically thinned with purified linseed oil before application. It's naturally water repellent and resists breaking down in sunlight, which is why it was once used on ship hulls and rope rigging. Linseed oil polymerizes as it dries, forming a tough, flexible film rather than a brittle one, moving with wood as temperatures shift instead of splitting. The lime buffers the mixture so it doesn't stay tacky forever or wash out in a hard rain, and it discourages the mold growth that eats through modern rubberized sealants over time. Agricultural extension archives from the early 20th century describe nearly identical formulas being used on barn roofs, wagon seams, and even boot leather, precisely because it didn't wear out and didn't need reapplying every season the way store-bought caulk does. When I asked Everett why his grandfather trusted it over anything sold today, he said something I haven't forgotten: because it moves with the wood instead of fighting it. Compare that to a standard silicone or polyurethane caulk, which hardens as it cures and stays hard. Wood roofing and metal flashing both expand and contract with heat and cold, sometimes by a fraction of an inch between a hot afternoon and a cold night. A rigid sealant fights that movement until it loses, cracking along the exact line it was meant to protect. The old mixture never fights the movement. It simply flexes with it, season after season, which is why it doesn't need to be redone every few years the way modern products do. This isn't a conspiracy, it's simpler than that and harder to fight. Roofing companies profit from full replacements, not $5 seam repairs, and a permanent $5 fix has never once shown up in a sales training manual. Shingle manufacturers profit from products with built-in expiration dates instead of materials that outlast the house, because a shingle rated to last forever doesn't generate a repeat customer 20 years later. Even the caulk sold at most hardware stores is formulated to need reapplication within a few years, because a tube that lasts a decade doesn't sell a second tube, and a shelf full of products that never need replacing is a shelf that stops moving. None of these industries sat in a room and agreed to bury this. They just built a system where a permanent fix was never profitable to mention. A system where the incentive at every level, from the manufacturer to the contractor standing on your driveway, points toward replacement instead of repair. A conspiracy you can fight because someone has to plan it and someone can expose it. A system that just feels like the way things are is a lot harder to see, let alone push back against, because nobody in it is doing anything you could call wrong. Here's exactly what you need and where to find it. Pine tar sold at most feed stores or online for around $6 a pint. Boiled linseed oil under $5 at any hardware store. Hydrated lime sold in small bags in the masonry section for about $4, though you'll only use a few tablespoons. Combine equal parts pine tar and linseed oil in an old metal container. Warm gently over low heat until they blend smooth. Then stir in the lime a little at a time until the mixture thickens into a paste. You'll also want an old metal container you don't mind staining, a putty knife, a wire brush, and a pair of work gloves, all things most people already have in a garage or a junk drawer. Warm the pine tar and linseed oil together over low heat, never over an open flame, until they loosen and blend into a single dark liquid. Add the lime slowly, stirring the whole time until the mixture thickens to about the consistency of cold honey. Clean the seam or flashing joint first, brushing away any loose grit, old caulk, or granules with the wire brush, and let the surface dry completely if it's been wet. Apply the paste with the putty knife in a layer about as thick as a coin, pressing it into the joint rather than smoothing it flat so it fills the gap instead of just sitting on top of it. Let it cure for 24 hours before any rain hits it, ideally choosing a dry stretch of weather to do this work. Total cost under $8, total time under an hour, most of it spent waiting for the mixture to warm and for the seam to dry. Here's what you'll notice over the following weeks. By the end of week 1, the paste will have darkened and firmed into a rubbery seal. By week 2, it will have shed its first hard rain without a drip. By week 4, you likely won't think about that seam again, because it will have stopped being a problem you check on. In the reading room of a county historical society, in a folder of pre-1945 agricultural bulletins, there's a typed instruction sheet on roof and wagon seam maintenance credited to a county extension agent working in that same Ozark region. The paper had gone soft and brown at the edges, the kind of brittle that makes you hold your breath while you turn a page. It describes almost word for word the mixture Everett showed me on his ladder, right down to the coffee can method of mixing it over low heat. Farmers were told to keep a can of it on hand every fall, the same way they kept feed stocked for winter, and to check every seam on the property before the first freeze. What that document proves isn't that the mixture is a secret. It proves it was once common knowledge, taught openly, passed from one household to the next, discussed on porches and in feed store lines, before it simply stopped being mentioned anywhere modern homeowners would see it. Somewhere between that bulletin and today, an entire generation of practical, provable know-how got quietly filed away in a folder that almost nobody thinks to open. By now, a few doubts have probably crept in, and they deserve real answers instead of being brushed aside. Some of you are wondering if something this simple can really hold up against real weather, the kind that ruins modern products within a few seasons. Everett's roof has taken Ozark ice storms, hailstorms, and July heat pushing past 100 degrees for over 90 years without a single tear off. It holds because it flexes instead of cracking, expanding and contracting with the wood the same way the wood does on its own, instead of fighting that movement until it fails. Some of you are thinking your roof is a different material, maybe metal or a newer architectural shingle, and this won't apply to your situation. The mixture works on any seam where two surfaces meet, regardless of the shingle style above it, because it's sealing the joint itself, not the surface around it. And every roof has joints. Some of you have a contractor who already told you sealants like this won't last, because that's what he's been trained to say about anything he doesn't sell. Ask him how long the caulk in his truck is actually rated for, and compare that number to a farmhouse still standing without a single leak after a century. If you're still not sure, don't take my word for it either. Try it on one small seam first and watch it through the next hard rain before you trust it on the whole roof. You didn't lose this knowledge by accident. It disappeared one building code at a time, one sales pitch at a time, one generation at a time, until fixing your own roof started to feel like something only a professional was allowed to do. Somewhere along the way, a lot of us stopped believing our own hands could solve a problem that used to be solved on a Saturday afternoon with whatever was already in the barn. There's a group of people out there, a lot of them our age, who are done paying to solve problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. They're not against hiring help when a job genuinely needs it. They're against paying 5 figures for what used to be an $8 afternoon, simply because nobody told them the cheaper answer still existed. If that's you, tell me in the comments which part of your house has been fixed the same way, over and over, without ever actually getting fixed. If this is the kind of thing worth knowing before your next repair bill, subscribe, because this channel exists to keep finding it. Next time, I'm walking through why the fence posts on a 100-year-old property have never rotted, and the trick behind it costs less than a single trip to the hardware store. I'll see you there.